Well, hello, everyone. Happy June. I am Gina Joseph. I am the marketing director here at In Context, and welcome to our Metaverse Today webcast, Unleashing the Power of AR and VR in Business Applications. Our presenter, Deanna Sheehan, is a principal consultant for In Context, and she'll be talking today about the Metaverse. So what is it really? How do we define it? How is it relevant to my brand or business? So she'll answer these questions and more, and with the goal of leaving all of you with a better understanding of how you can leverage metaverse experiences and digital tools for your marketing strategy. So before we start, you are welcome to ask questions in the chat box, and we'll answer those as we go, or we will come back to them. But if you do have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. We are also recording today's presentation, and so you will get the recording of this after, as well as our latest ebook, a practical guide to brand marketing in the metaverse. One final note, if anyone will be attending the Retail Innovation Conference and Expo, the RICE conference in Chicago on June 13th through 15th, we'll be there, and we'd love for you guys to swing by. So with that, Deanna, I'll let you kick things off.
Thank you so much, Gina. Everyone, I'm very excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about something that is very much a personal passion of mine. I actually joined In Context Solutions 3 years ago, and it was really driven by my belief that virtual reality was the path to kind of where e-commerce was going. As an element of that, you're going to kind of start to see here in this story that we're building how virtual reality leads to concepts like virtual commerce that exist today, and how it will ultimately, I believe, lead to meta commerce in kind of 5 to 10 years. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by really just tackling some of the larger kind of conversations about what we're kind of hearing about in the media, what we're hearing about in industry news. We're going to talk about if the metaverse is actually dead. We're also going to talk about what is the metaverse, because what I have found in talking to our clients is there's a lot of misconceptions about how people interpret the metaverse. And then we're going to dig into the component parts of what ultimately is being used to build the metaverse, almost as a precursor, and then where we think that will lead to with the metaverse moving forward. So let's start with something really, really not so simple. I have seen a number of headlines over the last probably month and a half, in essence, insinuating the metaverse opportunity is dead. A lot of that has been directly correlated to the increase in kind of media, in press coverage that's tied to generative AI, chat GPT or GPT, and where things are going in that space. So I think what I really wanted to start with is nipping this idea in the bud. The metaverse is not dead. In fact, the metaverse is continuing very cleanly to progress, or companies are investing in metaverse concepts in a way that is very consistent with how they've been investing for a number of years. What has happened is more that the coverage in the media, the buzz around metaverse has ultimately decreased to make room for the next big tech buzz idea. And the reason that's important to understand is this is actually a cycle that is very, very normal. And it's a cycle that actually Gartner a few years ago coined as a process. And in essence, it's the cycle of tech buzz. And I'm not calling it the exact right thing, but it's this hype cycle for technology and how that kind of is managed both through the media, through press, but also how that translates into strategy. So if we look at this, and you can probably think of a million different technology ideas and innovations and start to think through how they have played out in this cycle. So using Gartner's hype cycle, if we think about the metaverse, the technology trigger was very clear. It was Mark Zuckerberg coming out in 2021 and saying, we are changing Facebook's name to Meta. We are changing Facebook's name to Meta because we are all in on the metaverse. And that is our future at Facebook. And 2022, because that was done in late 2021, was the year of metaverse. You could not go a day without some company or some media agency talking about what the metaverse is, what it means, where is it going. And so if you move along that curve around the peak of inflated expectations, what's interesting is in this space where we are where we live in a technology kind of world, this idea of the peak of inflated expectations, it's really this idea of, hey, we've identified something, we've just heard about it, and you know what? It's going to change the world tomorrow. Except then it doesn't. And so what happens very naturally is, just as in other kind of news cycles, as something becomes less hot, and if it doesn't actually meet the hype that the press has set, it doesn't mean the concept itself is dead in the water. It just means that the media and kind of the buzz cycle has moved on to the next thing, which is where you start to move down into this idea of the trough of disillusionment. Now, the thing with the trough of disillusionment is actually this is the place where many, many companies give up too quickly. They walk away because things haven't turned around. And in the metaverse conversations, the time frame has been ridiculous. We were not going to go from nothing to transforming the way we work in 15 months. Technology wasn't there. Manufacturers and companies were not there. Consumers weren't there. But metaverse conversations have actually been happening for over a decade in a number of companies, and they are continuing to have those conversations. In fact, when you look kind of behind, when you look a little bit more deeply into media that is covering things within the technology space more concurrently, you're actually starting to see that there is a lot happening in metaverse conversations. It's just done in a more commercially focused way versus a consumer way, which is really where you start to see the trough of disillusionment start to move along this idea of the slope of enlightenment. What this came down to is the technology existed. People got excited about it. Zuckerberg got excited about it. But expectations peaked too quickly for where the technology was. However, the technology continues to become more sophisticated. We continue to start to see what the infrastructure of metaverse experiences could be. And so right now, where we are at, candidly, is we are at the place where you really want to invest early on. We are Amazon. When it first came out, no one thought Amazon could replace booksellers, and no one thought Amazon could become a retailer. And as the technology and the companies that progress with the technology build out their strategies, you are going to see the momentum build. You are going to see penetration grow, very likely first in industrial spaces and commercial spaces. So think businesses, and then from a consumer space. And we will then move on the path. A few years ago, there was actually about 2 months ago, there was an article that was recently published by Forbes magazine. And we were already starting to see the buzz die down on metaverse, and we saw the ChatGPT buzz start to rise. That article said outright, and it's something that Matthew Ball in his book published in 2022 said as well. The metaverse transformation isn't something that's going to happen overnight or even over 365 days. It's something that's about a decade out. That projection hasn't changed. The opportunity for the metaverse hasn't changed. It's about making sure right now, today, as you look at your strategic planning for the next 3 to 5 years, and then 5 to 7 years, that you are building the capabilities internally to be prepared for the metaverse by learning on the platforms that actually do exist today in a scalable level, to be able to then be prepared for what comes next. So let's start at the very beginning with what the heck is the metaverse? A lot of times we hear clients and consumers talk about the metaverse, a singular thing. That is not true. We also we see the same thing with things like virtual reality. We see people default to things like, this is something that only exists in a headset. None of that is true. So what is? First and foremost, we're going to start our conversation about metaverse by talking about extended reality. Extended reality is what exists today. This is something that has been used for well over a decade, both among consumers directly, but also within the business world for a number of different use cases. When we talk about extended reality, this really is a kind of a catchphrase that summarizes different types of way to engage with immersive experiences that are founded in 3D technology. So augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, which actually is a bit of an intersection between augmented reality and virtual reality that's used for very specific use cases. Now, when we talk about this, the core of extended reality is based on a foundational concept. Basically, the cell of extended reality is the 3D model. Now, it's something that could exist. It's something that is a 3D replication of something that may exist today, a product, a store, a place, or it's something that may never exist, as you think of things like films and how kind of people within the film industry have relied on 3D technology to create entire environments that don't exist and create ways for people to engage in the film and make them more entertaining and more immersive in ways that you can't get through kind of non-technical means. Metaverses, because there is a plurality to them. Metaverses are these fully immersive environments that actually then allow multiple people to come in together in this place and in essence be involved and immersed in that experience, right? So when you think about extended reality, this is more about experiencing something in kind of a single setting on your own or with a few people, but it's something that really can't be changed and it's something that is not live. You don't have multiple people engaging at once. You don't have people changing things. Metaverses are different. They really are their own unique ecosystems. They often have their own economies, and they have built communities within that ecosystem that people can participate and in essence, create in unique ways. As we progress, we're going to talk more about what that means, but I wanted to kind of start by reinforcing extended reality and metaverses are not discrete. They are actually connected, and they are connected because the foundation of both things are really founded in 3D assets, in digital twins. But with extended reality, they are generally independent, right? You are watching a film and that film is all you can watch. You can't connect from a Pixar movie to Avatar or RoboCop. They are not connected. You're not talking to multiple people. There are not communities there. It's really something done in isolation. They are generally immersive. There are varying degrees of immersiveness depending on how you experience them, but they are also static. They are built as they are built, and you really can't change them unless you go into the back end to make changes to those systems. With the metaverse, this is where you start to see the distinction. They are community-based. They're interconnected. They are independent for now. They're their own ecosystems. I see a place in the future, 5 to 10 years out, where there may be multiple metaverses connected, but that is not how they exist today. Right now, you can't take assets from Fortnite and move them into Roblox. They are independent on their own. They are highly immersive, they are complex, and you're able to create things. There are multiple people who can participate, and within that, you can personalize your own experiences based on how you engage. So that's kind of a very elementary way to distinguish between extended reality and metaverse. But what does that all mean? Well, one of the things is a lot of times we have been engaging in these experiences and we don't even notice. When you think about specifically virtual reality or the use of 3D animation or the use of 3D content to really enhance an experience, you see that most often with things like movies. Avatar was one of the first big movies in which they were very open about the 3D technology that they were using, about the virtual reality background they were using to build an environment that was completely unique and completely creative. And when you look at Pixar movies and other animated movies, at the core of those movies is 3D animation in a virtual reality setting. It's just then, in essence, recorded and presented to you as a film. Now, Snapchat is something that for any of us who play around in Snapchat, we have teenagers who are playing around in Snapchat. You recognize that there are all these filters that you can put on your phone. If you're someone like me, I will fully admit I am using a filter through Zoom to blur my appearance and making myself look a little bit more put together. Those are actually all, in essence, building off augmented reality to enhance the way that we look. And while it's not particularly individual 3D assets, it's done in different ways, they are all connected to this idea of extended reality. I am working with my physical space and then using filters to change how that physical space is encountered. And then I don't know if there are golfers listening in right now, but in sports, you have found a number of different ways in which people, consumers in particular, but also from a professional level, people have started to use virtual reality as a way to experience things when you can't actually or don't want to experience them in real life. This is not a picture of my husband in Chicago during the winter, but I can tell you right now, he spent every Monday in a virtual golf league with his friends Mondays during the winter because he couldn't get out. And they needed an alternative. I mean, virtual golfing was the thing, and it looks just like this, in which you can actually go and engage with the environment. You can literally golf and play in places like Pebble Beach as digital twins. So I've kind of talked through this extended reality piece. What are the three components? And I've touched on it very quickly. So let's dig in a little further. So one of the things, if you haven't heard the term, is I talked about the digital twin. So the idea of taking something that exists and replicating it with kind of a 3D visualization in an immersive experience that can ultimately then help people engage in a different way, right? You engage with something digitally versus physically. Now, one thing you see here, and I would actually challenge you to guess which picture is the physical picture in the store and which is the digital twin. What we have and what you often see with digital twins is, to a degree, there is a bit of an artwork element tied to it. Although AI is becoming more and more involved in building 3D assets, there are still elements that need to be accounted for that a physical eye, a human eye, really can enhance that broader experience. In this example, we have a digital twin of a Verizon store. And that store is ultimately then used for a number of different purposes: testing, planning, layout and design, marketing kind of evaluations. You also have 3D for us. You've got 3D digital twins of products as an example. This is something that we use in our work, where you can kind of test, you can plan, you can lay out categories, shelves, and structure things in different ways. These can also be used online for e-commerce or virtual commerce, and eventually for meta-commerce. When you think about virtual reality, you've got some of these commercial applications, right? As in context solutions, we have done consumer insights and shopper insights testing, looking at things like assortment, looking at new product development, looking at store layout using virtual reality. But you've also seen an evolution in which people use them for other things. So for training, what you see on the bottom with the plane was actually the structure of a virtual simulator that pilots use to train for specific, particularly challenging landings. You see an example here in the Natural History Museum in New York, in which people actually can opt into doing a virtual tour in which they're using Oculus headsets in different locations, and they actually bring history to life. And what's interesting with all of these is, again, you see the foundation in every single one of these is a 3D asset that is used to enhance the experience. And as we talk about all of this stuff, we've got to actually understand at a larger level this idea of a digital twin. While we're talking about virtual reality being kind of a mainstream component of business decisions for the last decade, digital twins started over 50 years ago. And actually, when you do the research, what you will find is the first documented digital twin was created in 1970 for the Apollo 13 mission. And it was actually the way that NASA was able to recreate what had broken on that Apollo 13 flight, and then problem solve using that digital twin to help get those astronauts home. So it's one of those where if you think about fundamentally 50 years ago, when NASA created the digital twin, the first digital twin, they were using that digital twin in the same way that we use digital twins today, to test, to plan, to strategize on things and how they will work. And then ultimately, hopefully, to then find a way to make that happen in real life, or make the outcomes happen in real life that we want to have. Now, augmented reality is something that's a little bit newer, and it's incredibly incredibly accessible to the average consumer. Now, you've got a couple examples here. We use, and a number of technology companies have created ways for people to utilize tablets or mobile phones to use augmented reality to make business decisions. So understanding if a display or signage or a new product really fits in the physical retail environment in which you're trying to place it. Understanding for e-commerce stores, furniture, apparel, makeup, trying to understand if what people are considering buying is really going to work for that person. Here you've got an example of the Wayfair app placing new furniture in the existing home to see if it's the right look for the right place. And where augmented reality really got introduced to the average consumer was through the launch of Pokemon Go. Something that, while the buzz has died down, it is still a highly successful game with a significant following. And it really introduced to anyone who had a smartphone the idea of how 3D assets superimposed on existing physical environments can drive awareness, can drive entertainment, and can ultimately be fun. Now, mixed reality is interesting. And it's interesting because what it really is this intersection of digital meets physical. So with virtual reality, you are really kind of living in something that is exclusively that space. With augmented reality, you're taking 3D assets and putting it over a physical space. For mixed reality, it is ultimately bringing together things like your own kind of your own touch and feel and into the world that you are in. So you see that physical world around you. You're not completely cut off by a headset. But in doing it, it brings in these 3D models in ways to then simulate real life experiences, particularly for training. Some of the more common known uses right now for mixed reality experiences are training. That's going to continue to evolve. The example you see here with the two people, Case Western was actually one of the first companies or the first medical schools to introduce this. The idea, it was called hollow anatomy. And what it is in essence, a mixed reality simulation tool that allowed medical students to explore the internal components of the body as part of training to prepare for things like treating a patient, surgery, things like that. That same technology has ultimately been recreated with different companies. It's been brought into different settings. So things like in manufacturing plants or in repair shops, trying to figure out things that are broken from a mechanical perspective to solve for different pieces. We've seen that same mixed reality training concept used in for first responders and trying to navigate major medical emergencies or fires or things like that, in which you get inputs that are being provided to you to help you make better decisions to save more lives. So as you can see with all of these, the foundation of these is the 3D model, and you just see then the applications and how you access those applied in different ways. And so one of the questions is, from a consumer and a business perspective, how are people using these initiatives? Well, it is planning, it's store design and layout, it's merchandising and shopper marketing. It's also things like kind of laying out, this is what we expect. So this is what we envision. Now let's move into that visualization of the concept so that we can communicate it on a scalable level. And then moving into things like testing concepts and ideas. So that from a consumer lens, the Apollo 13 example allowed astronauts to test the mechanics of a rocket ship that was failing and find alternative ways to keep them from failing. So testing can be done in a life-saving level, or it can be done from a branding and marketing perspective. But at the core, it allows you to make sure that the ideas that you want to implement are going to have an impact in real life. And then I gave some examples of the training piece. Then you move into brand experience. We'll talk a little bit about some of that, some of what that could be, and then commerce, and kind of connecting the dots between brand experience, virtual experiences for brands and commerce, and what's happening now and what will happen in the future. So to give you an idea of how this is actually brought to life for in context solutions, when we work with our clients, we generally do, we have a history of doing over a decade of shopper insights, really focusing on this idea of in-store execution and validating changes to in-store execution using virtual technology to confirm that they will have an incremental impact in the store in a positive way. So this is an example of a digital twin of a Walmart store. And you can see here what this does is not only do you see very clearly in a Walmart store, but you're able to see these 3D models of products, and people are able to kind of interact with the shelf, buy the products. When you take that and you look at it over a significant sample size, and you pair that with quantitative online survey research, you are able to tell both retailers and manufacturers how changes in store will impact sales. And you're also able to connect things like, why does the consumer change how they behave? What do they like about those changes? What do they notice, and what can be done better? That's just one instance of planning, visualizing, and then testing. It's done in a number of different ways, but it gives you a real life example. You can also see from a training perspective, this example here, Gina, who introduced us, this is her illustrating a use case within our store-based virtual testing environment or virtual visualization environment. And ultimately, it allowed sales teams to engage with a store, potentially identify opportunities for that store to be set up in a better way, and to figure out what needed to flag what needed to be changed, what needed to be improved, what was working, what wasn't, as a testing versus bringing all of these individual sales team members into physical stores all over the country. And it created cost savings for the training teams to be able to do this virtually from anywhere. I gave some examples of training from a larger mixed reality perspective, but I can tell you right now, some of the cooler use cases for virtual reality and training are actually being done right now in professional and highly competitive sports. So there are companies that specialize in virtual pitch training for Major League Baseball. There's a company called Stever that is a specialty in setting up kind of unique and customized environments in which professional quarterbacks. Carson Palmer is somebody who's very, very vocal about how virtual reality trainings have allowed him, or were allowing him in some of his better years, to get a better grasp of what his team was doing through practice and games, and then to make changes based on that through using virtual reality as a way to just see the whole field in a much different light as someone who was on the store versus, or on the field versus just watching video. We also see the national skiing team use virtual reality as a safer way for people doing ski jumping and things like that, as a way to train for the different types of courses they might encounter. Now, one of the things that we talked about is this idea of commerce and brand experience. We actually interviewed shoppers, and we recognized going into COVID that the world was changing. And we wanted to better understand what could make online shopping more enjoyable and more engaging for consumers. And what we heard from consumers, we heard it from all consumers, but we heard it most from younger consumers, that if they had the ability to look at virtual shelf and to engage in more interactive or immersive experiences, online shopping would be a better thing. And what we did is we took that, and that is something, again, I said, that's something that brought me to In Context Solutions, but it was something that we've already started to see some companies play around with this idea of virtual commerce today and in the last few years. Now, the way that they create those experiences is a little different than how we do. They generally kind of bring you into an environment that has been custom created, but you navigate it not necessarily in an interactive way, but you're kind of moved along a storyboard to be able to engage with the different component parts. You're connected to e-commerce, but more so by being linked to then the e-commerce site versus being able to shop in that experience. Now, this is absolutely something that is being done today. You can see here a Corona Premier experience tied to the PGA Golf Championship in March of 2023. You can see a Lint example here from the Christmas holidays that was highly successful. But again, they're not interactive. These are kind of stable. They are set, and you are moved along a path in a storyboard fashion versus being able to really engage in a more gamified way. So what we did is we tested an idea that we had based on what consumers told us, which was they would shop for things that were meant for kind of where you could participate in more of a focused way, the idea of a meal occasion or a special occasion, Super Bowl or Thanksgiving dinner. And what we did is we created a store that did not exist. Rather than it taking months to create, we created it in less than a week using assets that we had, and we let that consumer in essence shop that store. And we wanted to kind of see if they were connecting the dots. Was the assortment making sense? Was the idea of kind of the brands that were represented, the categories that were represented, did they make sense? And did the cross-category concept of deli and frozen and fresh and shelf stable all connected, did that actually drive incremental sales? Did that change how people thought about, in this case, shopping for breakfast? And we tested not only what you see here, but we actually also tested a couple of other ideas. We actually we started with something simple. This is something you know. It doesn't suspend kind of the concept of reality. Then we moved into, well, what if we really did break it up? What if we actually went from something that was really simple to something that was a little more sophisticated and focused on brands that were represented to something that would never exist in real life. There's never going to be a grocery store in a barnyard field surrounded by corn. But when you think about breakfast and you think about the idea of sunrise over the farm where you can get your fresh eggs and maybe your bacon, I'm not sure about that, your fresh fruit, would people like that? And what we found is absolutely. We found that people liked the store, but people spent more time in the virtual stores. And that really was across the board. They liked the idea of the store. And while the type of store did make a difference, at a larger level, people liked this idea of browsing. They definitely felt they did more browsing in a virtual store than they did online. They actually also felt they did more time browsing versus when they were in a physical store, in part because everything was right there. So browsing became easy versus a chore of having to cover significant geography as you're moving around an existing grocery store. We found that people really weren't looking to replace their total shopping experience for this, but they were definitely open to shopping it for specific reasons. And we found that about half of people said they would be interested in shopping both virtually, in addition to how their online shopping experience is. But we found 21% of people that said they'd actually prefer to shop virtually only, which is something that as you start to think through 3 to 5 years from now, as this becomes much more accessible, it really creates an opportunity to change how you engage as a brand. We also found, and again, I think this is one of the things when you think about virtual reality experiences and extended reality experiences, this is not about a headset. In fact, the bulk of experiences that we engage with when we are experiencing virtual reality or augmented reality or mixed reality are utilizing laptops and PCs or mobile phones and tablets. And so again, this is something where we're not waiting until every house has a headset. This is capitalizing on technology that exists today. And it's really more the apps and the sophistication of apps that are going to make this have coverage. So now let's talk about the metaverse. I know as we kind of continue to move on, the metaverse exists today. Metaverses exist. The metaverse as a interconnected set of environments that are run by different companies does not. But metaverses are actually incredibly successful right now and something that more than half of households engage with every day. But the bulk of those interactions are coming from games. So let's talk a little bit about metaverses today. One of the key questions for businesses, for brands, is really when you're talking about metaverse experiences, are you talking about utilizing metaverse experiences to connect consumers? Or are you talking about utilizing metaverse experiences to drive commercial value in your company? Both of these paths exist today. IBM actually coined the phrase for the commercial aspect, industrial metaverses. Both of these exist. They have actually existed successfully for a number of years, both consumer-facing metaverses and commercial metaverses. The nuance here is consumer-facing metaverses are really founded in games, in Fortnite, in Roblox, in Minecraft. Commercial metaverses are not so visible, in part because they are proprietary technology that are created in partnership with technology companies. They are being used for exactly the same reasons that extended reality is being used: to plan, to visualize concepts and understand how those concepts work, to test ideas, to use AI to create efficiencies. So Kroger worked with NVIDIA to create some virtual metaverse experiences that looked at the back end of their supply chain to make sure that they were optimizing the efficiencies of their online kind of commerce offer. You've got a number of players in this space. We'll talk about this as I finish up the session. But right now we're going to focus more on that consumer facing thing, because right now that is actually where brand and commerce come together, and in an incredibly scalable way. So first and foremost, right now, you can see that more than half of US consumers engage in some form of metaverse experience. The bulk of that is coming from mobile phone and tablet, and it's coming from games. So when we look at this, why this matters is, and we really could only talk to millennials and Gen Z, so those 18 plus, but when you start to talk about Gen Y and Gen Alpha, so those consumers under 18, they are fully immersed in the metaverse through Fortnite and Roblox specifically. But it's done in a way that's a little different than we're used to. So when we think about this, 72% of Roblox mobile users, or 72% of people who engage in Roblox are engaging on a mobile phone or a tablet. When you're talking about the fact that that's 40 million people a day engaging in one game on their mobile phone and tablet, and that almost 70% of those people are under 18. This is a huge future audience to connect to early on, which is why we start to see metaverse experiences lean into brand to drive penetration. Now, looking a little bit deeper, this just reinforces kind of what I've said before. When people are engaging, we actually we had a proprietary study. We did not interview children, we interviewed parents and asked them how their children engaged when we talk about children. But what you can see here is the most common kind of reasons people engage in metaverse experiences are for entertainment and gaming. You add in kind of that social component, and fully kind of transparently, these games, which were communities, became ways for both adults and children to stay socially connected, particularly during the pandemic, which really was the catalyst to build them into what they are now. Now, shopping was something that was interesting, but it wasn't something that really had been flushed out, which is why the numbers are relatively low. But at the core, you still had almost 50% of adults say that they were interested in metaverse experiences for shopping. Now, unsurprisingly, after everything that I just shared, just as with virtual commerce and engaging in virtual as a whole, you see this gravitate towards younger shoppers, younger consumers. And when you start to think through those consumers that are under 18, there is a huge potential to build relationships early on with those gamers, those players now. Right now, when we asked how many, like in essence, what percentage of households were people actively engaging in these platforms? So 50%, 49% of US households were engaging in Fortnite. Those were people 18 and older. 43% were engaging in Roblox. 43% of people engage with Roblox or 49% of households are engaging with Roblox that are 18 or older. This does not account for people who, focusing on people who have kids under 18, because we do know that more than roughly 70% of users of Roblox are under 18. So we weren't actually talking to them. That penetration number as a whole, the difference between this is the reason Roblox has 40 million users a day is because kids are getting on every day. While you see adults, when they're getting on Fortnite with about 80 million users every month, are getting on once a week or twice a week. But at a larger level, you have these metaverse experiences with full communities, with an economy tied to it in which people engage. And it has become a marketing platform that every brand needs to figure out how they fit into, in the same way that Instagram or YouTube has become. You also have smaller, more focused, less scalable metaverse experiences. These, the ones that are kind of below the line, are focused more on laptop, so they don't have their own gaming system or tablet. They are also geared more towards adults. However, a lot of these have actually been around for a decade or more, whereas Fortnite really just started in 2017. Roblox is a little older, but really just started building up again after the pandemic. So what I wanted to do now is really kind of give an example of a brand that's using Roblox to actively engage its consumers. Now, that example is actually probably the fourth iteration of working and creating unique games for Roblox that Chipotle has done since 2021. And they've really mastered this idea of connecting people playing in that digital metaverse with Roblox. So creating burritos to earn coupons to get free burritos in the physical store. They have mastered this idea of how can I engage consumers, some that I might not actually be able to talk to directly because of their age, in a digital environment, and then get them to my physical store to drive sales. That the video that I just showed you is this game. It's the fourth game. It's called the Burrito Builder. It was released about 6 months ago. In the first week, it had over 4 million people play that game to earn free burritos. At kind of in the last count, they had, after about a month, I haven't found new numbers there, but within a month of it being launched, 17 million people had engaged with that game. If you really think about the idea of spending, even on digital advertising, but particularly as you think about spending on TV advertising and some of the more traditional means, you really never know how many people are paying attention to what you do. This is something they knew, not only who the people were, they knew how they engaged, how they played, what they built in their burrito. And then they got coupons that sent those 17 million people to their stores to get a free burrito and to keep them coming back. And that's a brilliant way of driving brand penetration and awareness online. We have Forever 21 that actually in 2021 launched an exclusive digital apparel line. And it included hoodies, and it included beanies, and it included t-shirts, and people bought them for the avatar. It was connected to a store that they built in Roblox as well. What they did a year later is they recreated every single one of those apparel ideas from the digital store, and they brought them to their physical stores for people to be able to buy the beanie that they had in Roblox in real life and bring it home. And that was something that was highly successful for them. It's something they continue to do to engage with their consumers, and they're even looking at ways to evolve that. And then here's just a quick example, because I know I'm running out of time, about how the NBA has tried to really connect to a number of consumers. And what you can see with that example for the NBA is it wasn't about trying to get people to buy things. It was about getting people to sign in. That was tied to the NBA All-Star game. It was tied to both the women's All-Star game and so the WNBA and the NBA All-Star game. And it was a way to connect to consumers, to drive brand, and to get people to watch on TV, which for them led to revenue through media dollars. Those are consumer applications. From a commercial perspective, you've got NVIDIA, you've got IBM, you've actually got Apple, who for 3 years there has been buzz about what they are going to do in the metaverse. And we are finally, something was actually released yesterday on Forbes. The buzz is they will be coming out and announcing what their metaverse experience is in the next 4 weeks. You've obviously got Meta, which is the example in that kind of top right-hand corner. And for these guys, they are focusing on that industrial metaverse, on the commercial application. So they are focusing on using metaverse experiences to drive efficiencies and process decisions within companies, to improve the efficiency of trainings, to decrease the costs of training and development, and more. So one of the things as we talk about metaverse is part of what's interesting is this is one of those places where there is a clear consumer use case through Fortnite and Roblox that gives an indication of how powerful metaverse experiences can be at a larger scale. But we are only scratching the surface from a commercial perspective. And that's something that's going to be coming in time as people build out their digital assets, as they think through how for their companies the right way to engage in metaverse experiences is, and as they determine and confirm that their employee base is actually ready for a socially connected internal infrastructure that allows them to use metaverse to train together. Because that's one of the key elements of the metaverse, or of a metaverse, and how it's different than extended reality is the key piece of metaverses is that it brings people together in a way in which they can collaborate. So I'm hoping you walk away understanding the metaverse is not dead. It's just the hype that went into it. We're on the back end of the hype cycle, moving into the real opportunities. Extended reality serves as that path. 3D assets are the key for both extended reality and metaverse. And as we kind of continue to progress, companies have used extended reality for a number of years to make business decisions and drive commercial success. Metaverse experiences are coming. It's really about finding the right use cases and ensuring the technology has caught up and is able to provide what people need in those spaces. So we're going to end with just what's next. What we currently at In Context really are recommending our clients do is start by understanding where you sit today in your extended reality and metaverse strategy. What is your digital content strategy? What do those libraries look like? What are your competitors doing both with extended reality, but also with the metaverse? Are they on Roblox or Fortnite? Are they engaging with their consumers in that way? And if they are, how are they doing it? How are close-in non-direct competitors engaging, right? If you are in juice or water, how are soda brands and energy drink brands or alcohol brands engaging? After you go through and really assess your current situation, how do you build out your transformation roadmap? So how do you start with 2023 and 2024, see where you're at, and then make sure you're in the right place as you start to look out to 2025 and 2028 and 2030? Because the metaverse is coming. Metaverses are going to become an integral part of how we work and play. It's just that in 2022, the hype had peaked too early. Now technology is going to catch up and get us where it needs to be. Gina, I'll stop.
All right. Thanks so much, Deanna. I think it's so important today to have that solid understanding of how to define and leverage these metaverse experiences, as well as the many components that make up metaverse experiences, because brands and companies, as you said, are already doing this today. So thank you so much for breaking all that down for us. And all right, everyone, look out for an email with the recording, as well as a link to download the ebook. And thanks so much for joining us.